Joining us right now to talk about how AI might help us track whale movements, I've got Ruth Joy on the line, an assistant professor at the School of Environmental Sciences and associate member of statistics at Simon Fraser University. It's Simon Fraser University and the Humans and Algorithms Listening for Orcas project that we're talking about here. Ruth Joy, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Hi, Ryan.
It's great to get you here. So this is kind of cool. I'm trying to get my head around it, though. What is it you're trying to accomplish here? What do you need to do? And then we'll work out why AI is the right tool for it.
Yeah, okay. So we have a couple different kinds of ecotypes of killer whales, different kinds of killer whales, one that eats Chinook salmon and one that eats marine mammals, and both of them have status that they need to be protected under federal law, but we're particularly interested in the southern resident killer whales, which I'm sure your listeners know is the most endangered of our killer whales on the BC coast. And so we're trying to be able to detect them in real time, and one of the best ways to do that is through their vocalizations. So we're using AI to listen in real time and write algorithms to be able to detect which ecotype of killer whale we're listening to.
Okay, so you're listening to the sounds of the ocean. AI can kind of say, oh, that sounds like a transient whale's call, and that sounds like a southern resident killer whale's noises, and that sounds like something totally different. So doing that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So the first trick is to detect them amongst all the other things that make noises. Most things in the ocean make noise. And then the other is to figure out what it is that's making the noise.
Do we already have listening devices out there around the ocean?
Yeah, so there's the shipping lanes, as you can imagine, that the commercial vessels stay within as they're coming into port. And so there's a number of different hydrophones or listening stations along the pathway. And so we're going to use the existing hydrophones that are out there to listen in real time to the sounds and try to process that sound data, which is high volume data, and use these algorithms to detect the southern resident killer whales.
Oh, that's really cool. We've already got the listening happening. We just need something that can make sense of all of that noise, and that's where AI comes in. How big of a deal is this? Like, because AI is such a buzzword right now. It's in everything. People are talking about it as like this big revolutionary thing, and I guess this is another example of something that you probably couldn't have done before without it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you can do it with using basic statistical methods, but there's really has been a revolution in AI algorithms. So we're using deep learning models or neural nets to be able to train models to identify the southern residents, and they're quite as different dialects. So if you can imagine speaking two different languages, that's what we're listening for. So the difference between French and English, for example, it's where you can use large language models to tell, well, I'm sure you use ChatGPT or some of those large language models that are available to us now and have only just been made available to us. So we're using similar, not as much training data, unfortunately, as for those large language models, but the same concept of using computers to be able to tell differences between languages that killer whales are speaking.
It's actually kind of neat to think that we are decoding whale language in a sense. Like, that is just so cool.
Yeah, we don't know what they're saying.
but we can tell the accents.
They haven't told us that yet.
Yeah, we don't know what the words mean, but we at least know this is a southern resident killer whale dialect versus a different whale. Could this be expanded to other whales beyond these? Like, could we, I don't know, see what?
Sure.
Throw gray whales in there and all of the others.
Yeah, so gray whales typically don't make that much sound, so they're trickier to, especially in the Salish Sea. They make sounds off of the west coast of Vancouver Island, so it might work better there. Humpbacks are very noisy. They're love to sing and practice their songs. They make social calls as well. They're also mimics, so they mimic southern residents' sounds. So they're kind of the whale that everyone hates in AI because they're a bit like starlings. If you know your birds at all, or your listeners do, they pick up fragments of other whales and put it into their vocalizations as well. So yeah, so that makes it a little trickier than just southern residents. It's keeping the humpbacks out of the detection algorithms as well.
Is this really a Southern resident, or is some humpback playing with me here and pretending?
Yes.
That's so funny. I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you've got the AI models working, trained up on what whale sounds like what, interpreting all this data, and now you can track them. You can say track the Southern resident killer whales, which seems to be one of the big goals here. What do you do with that then? Why do we need to track them?
Yeah, so the idea is that it takes a long time to slow a commercial vessel down, and so they need to know well in advance when there might be a southern resident in the shipping lanes. And so the idea is to use statistical modeling to predict 2 or 3 hours ahead when the killer whales will be entering the commercial vessel lanes, or could be. So there's a potential overlap in where the whales are, where the ships are. And so the idea behind it is that we can tell the pilots in good enough time that they can slow their vessels down, and by slowing the vessels down, it reduces the underwater noise. And so that protects, in a sense, at least in the federal law sense, it protects the habitat by reducing the amount of noise that's emitted into the water by a slower propeller.
Well, that is such a cool project. Thank you so much for telling me about it. Ruth Joy, assistant professor at the School of Environmental Science at Simon Fraser University, associate member of statistics as well. The Humans and Algorithms Listening for Orcas project, a new chunk of cash, by the way. So this is all powered by a $1 million funding injection that you got there. And this is what you're doing with it. And thank you so much for telling us about it.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. I think that's just kind of neat. I mean, obviously important stuff to be able to keep whales safe in those shipping lanes and maybe finding a way to kind of get ahead of that. But just the idea that we have the ability to decode whale accents. Maybe we don't know what they're saying, but we can tell which whales are which. I think that's kind of fun. We'll take a break. CFAX 1070, 7 o'clock news is next.